First of all, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I am Saransh Bansal, the Joint Secretary of Indian Association of Age Management, and I welcome you all to our webinar on COVID-19 in senior citizens. I hope everyone is safe and boosting their immunity. While COVID-19 needs no introduction, these are unprecedented times which require us to be alert, safe, and well informed. Our organization is an association of doctors who place senior citizens and their health at their epicenter and believe in adding life to their years. We all know the geriatric population in India is over 100 million. As one of the most vulnerable sections during this time, it is our duty to sensitize doctors, families, neighbors, and individuals to problems that lie ahead as we tackle this collective crisis. Today, we have four speakers during this session from various fields within the healthcare system, covering areas of pathogenesis, finding a therapeutic approach, and tackling the challenges better. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome our first speaker, Dr. Suresh Bansal, who has taken a keen interest in geriatrics and done a lot of selfless service for the same. He is a former professor of neurology from PGI Chandigarh with almost 5 decades of experience behind him. He was recently nominated as a fellow of the Indian Academy of Neurology and serves as the president of our organization. He will introduce COVID-19 in the way he perceives it. Suresh sir?
Yeah. Hello. Good evening, everyone. Seniors and doctors and other people who have joined this important topic, which has challenged the whole world, and there is no seems to be let out. Let me start with in the way I perceive this COVID-19 infection in each one of us or all of us, and in which way this is going to be there. Prima facie, as far as the virus is concerned, I'm not going to go into details that what are viruses. But these viruses, there are various type of viruses. But as far as the COVID-19 is concerned, this is one of the zoonotic virus. Now, this zoonotic virus is the virus which comes from the animals. There are various type of infections which is possible in human beings, various type of infection in animals. So somehow, as far as the life cycle is concerned, this particular virus is in the animals only. By virtue of some known or unknown causes, it gets into the humans, and then it creates maybe pathogenicity. In some, others, there may not be much of pathogenicity. Corona name, as most of you must be knowing why it has been given the coronavirus name, there was surely the break, not exactly pandemic, but epidemic. Epidemic means when this is going to be a small group, maybe small ethnicity, and that was in 2003, which was there in China. And thereafter, this was started from China, and this was again 2012, and this started from Saudi Arabia, and now this is 2019. Why this is important? Why I'm talking this? Because this virus is going to affect our one of the important three vital organs. That's the lungs. So the root in this particular virus is through our respiratory pathways. As you are seeing, when we are putting something scratching on the nose or maybe in the eyes, this is the end root through which the virus gets in. You can see a figure below also, the nasopharynx, and you must have seen so many times in the media also that is being taken from the oropharynx. What is this oropharynx? It's the back of the nose and back of the mouth. You can see the yellow area. So this is the area where there is an inoculation occurs by and large in majority of the people. And some of them, there can be inoculation through the conjunctiva of that of the eye, or that this can trickle down to the trachea or the windpipe. So it's not new as far as the infection is concerned, but this is surely new as to the virulence of this virus is concerned, and it has taken up the pandemic, which is very, very challenging. Next slide, please. Next slide, Saransh. Saransh, next slide. Bone. So from here, the immunity starts, and immunity basically is the prima facie of two types. One is there immunity needs defense mechanisms. Now the defense mechanisms of immunity, which can be checked or on which we are doing all these tests, is the humoral immunity. It means that there is antibodies. Antigen means the virus. Antibody means the defense mechanism, and these antibodies will be there in the blood on which different type of antibody will be taken up and that in the blood, and there is cellular immunity also. It means that the cellular also there are some sort of body resistance. But sure, immunity. No, in which way it weakens? Number of the T cells almost remains. I mean, immune system cells they are same. But as far as the function is concerned, just like aging of the body and mind, the aging of these T cells also start working. I have made this figure for you. It's just a rough figure, a sort of a eye-catching picture. You can see red side, which is tilting the balance toward the lower immunity in the old age. The most of these viruses they cause flu-like symptoms, and you know the immunity, low immunity is going to be responsible for so many things as far as the old age is concerned. It's not only the quality of the disease or the quantum of the disease. Hello, can you hear me? Hello.
So carry on. We can hear you.
Yeah. So it is the quality of the quantity of the symptoms. The more important is even the vaccine. The vaccine is also not going to respond that nicely because there is a poor immunity, there is a poor defense mechanism. So in case we are going to develop, so in that situation also, as far as the old guys are concerned, they are going to behave poorly and they are going to take possibly long time rather than the youngsters, where the immunity or the immune system is better and much strong. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide.
Yes, sir.
Saransh, next slide.
Yes, sir. Just 1 second. It's taking a little bit of it time.
So next slide is basically to tell us the various things which you are saying. No, this is basically the changing trend. This is my own observation. You see, over the years, in case I'm going to talk about my experience of 50 years, in the last 50 years, there are a lot many things which has changed as far as the behavior of the infection is concerned. I am feeling are viruses taking over the bacterial infections? If I'm going to look back even 5 years before, during this season, there used to be a lot of malaria cases, there used to be a lot of typhoid cases, but now there are going to be various type of outbreaks as far as the virus is concerned. We are very well aware of the fact that in the last few years in Nigeria, there was outbreak of the Lassa virus. In Kerala, there was Nipah virus, which was a resulting brain infection. In Brazil, there was yellow fever, Ebola in West Africa, Zika affected 3,500 babies, where the nervous system was affected, along with the eyes. Any virus, which we have seen recently, a few years back, and then SARS and MERS, and last years maybe chikungunya, and now this is Corona 19. So that's why I was wondering: is the behavior of the infection is changing? As far as the bacterial infection is concerned, we were having something to offer to them. But as far as the viral infection is concerned, there is a poor therapeutic measures which we can undertake. And somehow, these viral infection, once this gets into the body, particularly into the lungs, there is a superadded bacterial infection, sepsis, and that becomes one of the important cause which takes the person away from us. The next slide, please. In the next slide, I'm going to show you all the same thing as to the washing of the hand is concerned, or maybe the space is concerned, or the congestion area should be checked in. More important thing is why we touch our mouth, our face. No, there are various theories and there are various facts which has been related. A person somehow, whatever, touches the face or the head are almost 20 times in a minute. So why it touches? There are various sort of theories. Maybe more like a body language, some sort of gratification. One of the neurologists has put forth that there are some sort of sensors on the skin of the face, and touching those sensors gives some sort of gratification. Over and above, in the present day lifestyle, we are applying so many perfumes or maybe creams, or those persons who are having bronchial asthma or nasal allergy. Again, there are some sort of itchy sensation around the nose, or maybe tickling sensation inside the nose, and that make us to keep on we keep on touching our face, which may be one of the important thing measures which needs to be avoided in COVID-19. One and all, maybe youngster or even in the old age also. And the second important thing is the infectivity. Uh, as far as the infectivity is concerned, it depends upon the duration of exposure, the quantum of the bacteria which is being inoculated, and the quantum of the body resistance which is there in the person which is going to be infected. By and large, it has been seen that those persons, in case we are going to divide as far as the COVID-19 patient, may be asymptomatic, wherein some people say they are carriers, or maybe mildly symptomatic, minimal symptomatic, or significantly symptomatic, or grossly symptomatic, who are going to require even respiratory support, which is otherwise needed world over in about 20% cases only. So it all depends, virulence depends upon the next slide, please. Now I'm coming as far as old age concerned. It is not only going down, there is a change in immunity also. So that's responsible for some sort of autoimmune disorders also. Just see the curve. Just see the curve in case we are going to define the 65 to 75 year of age or 70 to 80 years of age. There is not many diseases which is this affects the body, various part of the body through abnormal immunity like arthritis. As far as the asthma is concerned, it's again in a bimodal disorder wherein this is more common, as well as this is more common in old age also. And then diabetes, not all type of diabetes, but there are certain type of diabetes which is immune mediated. As far as the cancer prevalence incidence, this is increasing over the years. This has also been labeled by virtue of the altered immunity or low immunity. So this is what I wanted to tell about the introduction. There are so many things which can talk, but there are other speakers who are going to talk about the various aspects. I hope there will be many questions also, which will be answered after the end of the speakers. I'll going to pass on the mic to Dr. Saransh. Thank you very much. Saransh?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. That was really informative. An interesting point in your slide that you raised, that are viruses taking over the bacterial load of infections presently that we have. Really interesting, food for thought. We will give it a thought, sir. Our second speaker for today is Dr. Ashok Ratan. He is an eminent microbiologist from New Delhi. He is a former professor of microbiology at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi, and he served the institution tirelessly for years at end. In 2018, he was awarded the prestigious Abdul Kalam Award for lifetime contribution in medical sciences. He plays a key role in WHO as a lab director, and at present lends his services as an advisor to Pathkind Labs, Gurgaon. Today, and I hope you can clear more doubts and raise more questions by the end of your talk. Sir. I leave it on to you.
Thank you, Saransh. Let me start with loading my slides.
Yeah, we can see your slides. Yeah, that's the first slide.
Okay. So, if we summarize what we know, that this is a new virus and it is causing an unprecedented pandemic in modern times, since there is no proven therapy and no preventive vaccination. All of us are susceptible to infection. We are really in uncharted territory. In this bleak situation, diagnosis is proving an important tool because it informs patient management as well as it has potential to save lives by limiting spread of infection. In diagnosis, we should be clear about what to test, when to test, and whom to test. The disease spreads through small droplets which come from the mouth. These droplets can travel only till about 6 feet. So it's only if we are standing within 6 feet that our hands and nose can be infected. And then after that, if we touch our mouths, it will transfer. It also transfers by touching objects. And then the infection, because the virus stays in the air for a short duration of time. So if you stand in front of a person who's sneezing or coughing, you would be infected. But otherwise, if a person is not sneezing or coughing, then it's not there in the air for a long time. It settles to the ground. On copper, it stays for only a few hours, but on stainless steel and in plastic, it can stay for days together. The virus is susceptible to alcohol. So 70% alcohol will kill the virus. It will also be cleaned by soap and water. It is susceptible to heat. If you heat at 56 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes, it will also die if it is dried, if the secretions are dried, or in sunlight or UV light. The virus enters the body by binding to receptors known as ACE2 receptors. These ACE2 receptors are present in the nose and mouth. It's also present in the heart, in the brain, and in the kidneys. And this way, the virus enters the body. Once it is inside the body, it starts multiplying. This is an RNA virus, and it uses the mechanism of the body to produce its proteins and to replicate. As a consequence of growth of the virus, the cell dies. So many cells are produced and this whole cell dies. Its common feature is fever, cough, which is usually dry, and shortness of breath. These are the features. 83% of persons will have cough, 82 would have dry, would have 83% will have fever, 82% will have dry cough, and 31 will have shortness of breath. WHO, recently CDC Atlanta has also added that besides cough and shortness of breath, fever, chills, repeated shivering with chills, muscular pain, headache, sore throat, and new loss of taste or smell is also there. Only in 80% of cases, in 80% it is 80% of cases it's mild. Only 20% are admitted in the hospital. So as the virus grows inside the lungs, it can cause collection of fluid. Initially, it was felt that it was only causing pneumonia. Now we know that besides pneumonia, it also leads to disseminated intravascular thrombosis. As a consequence, there could be embolism in various parts of the body. Older persons, that is persons over 65, are at increased risk. Even younger persons, if they have severe illness, they are also at increased risk. Persons with liver disease, persons with asthma, persons with immunocompromised nature, smokers, those who are having steroids, they are at increased risk. It's been seen that comorbidity is present in 80% of cases of those who are less than 60, but it's present in more than 93% of cases of those who are more than 60 years of age. And in Delhi, the comorbidity scenes are uncontrolled blood sugar, high blood pressure, a recent history of stroke or heart attack, or kidney ailment. So in case you are having any of these predisposing conditions, you should take extra precautions. The precautions would be to wash hands as frequently as possible, since the virus is transmitted after touching something. So once you touch something, and instead of touching your face, you should wash your hands with soap and water. Using mask will benefit not only you, but also others. And we should maintain social distancing, because the virus can travel about 2 to 3 feet only. We should take regular medications for the pre-existing ailments. You should keep supplies of medicines at hand. Avoid travel, stay at home as much as possible, and you should plan that in case you fall sick, whom you will consult and what is to be done, so that it should be pre-planned. And if you have symptoms, you should not ignore them, and you should teleconsult your doctor. This is a video saying how the sample is collected. The sample which is collected is normally from the nose or from the throat. And this is placed into a medium known as viral transport medium. So only a throat swab or a nasal swab is placed, and then the stem is broken and it is transported to the lab. It's been seen that various samples can be taken, but recently it was found that the virus was present in high concentration in the saliva. And in America, a US FDA has allowed saliva to be collected by the patient and sent to the lab. Unfortunately, ICMR has not yet permitted that. Since the virus was described in 2019, by 10th of January, the sequence of the virus was known. By the next day, sequence of 6 other viruses of the same species were known. And as a consequence, we could make a test known as real-time PCR. Real-time PCR looks at the RNA of the virus. Since this is a RNA virus, it has to be converted into DNA. And then after it has been converted into DNA, we can then amplify it keep on increasing, double every time, every cycle, and as a consequence, in a 3 hours or 4 hours, we can get enough sample to detect it positive. There have been various genes which have been amplified. There is the spike protein by which the virus binds to the ACE2 receptors. There's envelope protein, there is membrane protein, and there's N or nucleocapsid protein. We use a system we got from Thermo Fisher, which looks at 3 genes which are personal to this virus: the ORF1A gene, the N gene, and the S gene. And to find out whether RNA is being extracted or not, we have an MS2 gene. So this is how the test need to be done. If a person comes early after contact, then viral DNA, viral RNA or viral antigen will be present. But if a person has history of suffering from infection for 6 days to 10 days, then antibodies of IgG or IgM would be better. So depending upon how long the person is sick, we would decide which test to use. For real-time PCR, which has been the test which is said to be the gold standard, the sample is taken, extraction of nucleic acid occurs, we do the test, and we analyze the result. In the recent past, in the newspaper, there have been hue and cry on false positives. False positives by private labs, which when we test again in government labs, they turn out to be negative. The test will become positive when the DNA increases to such a level that it becomes over the threshold. This value is known as cycle when threshold is overcome. That is CT value. If CT value is there, then as you notice here, after the arrow, it goes up and that can be detected. In this case, only the control has been amplified, so that means this is a negative report. In this case, not only the control, but all the 3 genes of the virus have been amplified. It means this is a positive report. So as I'm trying to indicate, that positive is clearly positive and negative is clearly negative. Positive will occur only if virus is present in the sample. Negative can occur if the sample is not collected well, or if the sample is collected too early or too late in the disease. So negative is more possible, positive is less possible. It was also reported in China that besides detecting the virus, if you look for antibodies, you would be able to complete the picture. And another scientist, Gao, reported that if you do only RT-PCR, then about 52% of samples will be positive. But if you do RT-PCR plus serology, then majority of samples will be positive. But yes, RT-PCR is positive in the first week, while antibodies are present in the second week. Now, I think what we've done was we've chosen the wrong antibody test to use. We use what is known as lateral flow, which was not sensitive. What is required is either ELISA or chemiluminescence. Chemiluminescence is 100 times more sensitive than lateral flow, and that would have been better. This is just comparing that for detection of the virus or antibodies, RNA will detect new infection while antibodies will detect past infection. Finally, coming to how to avoid. When a person talks, when he sneezes, the virus travels the furthest. Once he coughs, it travels for more than 2 meters. But when he talks normally, it will travel about 3 feet. So the mask that you can have, one is homemade mask. The second one is a three-ply surgical mask. The third one is N95 respirator mask. Normally, doctors or those who are interfering in the throat and lungs of the patients should wear N95 mask. Healthcare workers must wear surgical mask, while uh, ordinary persons, if they wear household mask, that also will suffice. You would notice here that tea cloth household mask will reduce it by 33%, while surgical mask would let 25% pass, while 90 N95 will reduce at least 95% of infection from outside will be reduced. But if a person is infected and wears the mask, it will still help and it will prevent infection. Mask wearing is beneficial for prevention of infection if both persons wear the mask, the carrier as well as the probable person who can suffer. The infection rate will be 1.5%. If only one person is wearing and the carrier is not wearing, there's 70% chance that infection can occur. So wearing the mask benefit if you are suffering from infection or if others are suffering from infection. So it protects those for inward protection as well as outward protection. I think there's an acronym my grandson uses which says avoid touching men, which is mouth, ear and nose. That's don't touch men and follow women. Wash your hands, observe orders, move away from crowds, exercise regularly, and never ignore warning symptoms. Washing hands with soap and water is very useful. I think that's all I had to say this time. So soap and water would be useful because soap will be able to remove the virus from the hand. When you use soap and water, you should at least wash your hands for 20 seconds, which they normally sing happy birthday to you twice. All right, Saransh.
Thank you, sir. That was a very good presentation, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to take home quite a few things from that presentation. Next, I would like to call upon Dr. Anand, who is a professor of anesthesiology and critical care at the Government Medical College and Hospital in Chandigarh. He is a teacher and an academician with over 50 international and national publications to his name. He has found out the time, although he is leading the fight against COVID in Chandigarh because his hospital has been termed a COVID hospital, and I'm really grateful for him to take out the time, make a presentation, and be a part of this session. Dr. Anand sir, whenever you're ready, you can share your screen, sir. Dr. Anand sir?
Yeah.
Yes, we can see you. You can share your screen now, sir.
Share. Just hold on. Share na screen.
Important points to note from Dr. Ratan's talk. First of all, the importance of masks, whether it be household masks, whether it be surgical masks, We should all wear masks, and of course, social distancing is the way to go ahead. And I think even in the near future, for some time, we will be carrying on with social distancing for a bit for our own good and for the society's good. Giving it now to Dr. Lakesh Anand sir, who's taken out his precious time from his work and is here to join us. Sir, on to you. Sir, if you could do full screen, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir, we can hear you. If you could do full screen, sir. Yes, sir. Perfect.
This is full screen.
Yes, sir. Perfect.
So,
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
first, good evening to all. And I'm thankful to Indian Association of Age Management who has providing me this opportunity to be with you. And like we are in the pandemic, and we are with the people who are senior citizens. First of all, basically the like previous speakers already have described in detail all the things, and what is important is the above the age of 65, the physiological aging causing the reduce the capacity of body in all organs, starting from brain, heart, nervous system, kidney. All our function is gradually coming down toward the lowers and other changing in the body. So this was highly emphasized that decrease immune function, and this group of patient is having so many comorbidities, that is cardiovascular system like hypertension, coronary artery disease, diabetes mellitus, the chronic obstructive airway disease, chronic kidney disease, smoking, cancer, and they may be some at one point they may be in the not controlled very well. Of course, the positive side we have aging healthily are less at risk. We have seen so many examples that age of up to 100 were completely recovered from the confirmed cases. As age increased, the hospitalization rate increased with the age increased. If you see, at 4% age group, up to 18% hospitalization was observed in 80 or more than 80 years of individuals. And elderly association with increased mortality, like 8% is up to 70 to 80%, 80 years, and this can increase to 15% in 80 or more than 80 years. So that suffice that increasing age has some implications about the disease process we are fighting. Common symptoms has already highlighted by previous speakers, and what we even the important point is there. Here is important point is here is there are so many asymptomatic cases are there, so it's very difficult to find. So we have to be more careful. The disease from asymptomatic or from starting, it will take at least 5 days, and no to mild pneumonia can develop in 80% of cases in 5 days. If the disease is controlled at this point, they may progress to the severe pneumonia in 7 to 12 days, and that is what we call is that we cause as acute respiratory distress syndrome. Because this is because of COVID, so we give name the CARDS, COVID associated acute respiratory distress syndrome. Clinical respiratory failure, the other condition, other clinical diseases like respiratory failure, shock, or multi-organ dysfunction can occur in this group of patients more in comparison to the middle age. This is one of the retrospective study from the China. They compared the 56 patients where the divided into elderly more than 60 or more than 60 and young middle age up to less than 60 years of age. What they have found is the elderly patient, they have more pneumonia severity index in comparison to the middle age groups. This aged or elderly was having more incidence of acute liver and kidney injury, of course, and the mechanical ventilation in admission to ICU was more in this group of patients, those who are 60 or more than 60. So it's very important to see here because this group is very important. And we have to take care this. The patient also has to take care. They must understand the disease process, their physiology, and their comorbidities. Diagnosis already highlighted. The clinical, on the basis of clinical features, there are so many tests: nasopharyngeal, oropharyngeal swab, bronchoalveolar lavage, tracheal aspirate, sputum, blood, urine, and stool also have the virus. And the imaging facility like lung scan is supposed to be the one of the investigation while we can see the involvement, how the lung is involved with the disease, and associate can be coordinated with the symptoms. Basic therapeutic approach is number one, to handle the infection, the severe infection, and once they have recovered, discharge after recovery. So mild infection can be or have to manage at the outpatient or home. The focus of here is prevention of transmission to the other individuals. Severe infection has to be hospitalized for infection control and supportive care, and that initial mild has to be given adequate oxygenation. The oxygenation may be depending upon the severity, and if the disease is not controlled, they may further progress that these patients may require the ventilatory support. For that, we have to shift those patients to the intensive. Further investigation and other approaches according to the development of the particular patient. So prevention should be followed by all individuals because it is important is prevention. So infection control already highlighted by previous speaker. So personal protective measures, social distancing already is being highlighted. Hand washing, respiratory hygiene, avoiding touching the face, cleaning and disinfecting objects and surfaces. The important is asymptomatic carrier with potential exposure. So we have to identify. Very, very important. The importance of wearing the mask by all that they are having symptoms or not is very important. Otherwise, they'll not have any symptoms, though they might feel that they are not carrying any virus, but asymptomatic doesn't mean they don't have the virus. So it's very important the barrier precaution, that is mask. So global public health measure, we see till today we have around 86,000 patient, individual has been infected with coronavirus, and in India, 2,760 patients have died. So again, for controlling as a pandemic, these measures are important: social and physical distancing orders, stay at home, closure of all the organizations where the crowd is there, like school, the other venues, and non-essential barriers, ban on the public gathering, the travel restriction for exit and entry, aggressive case identification and isolate them, contact tracing and quarantine those individuals. So in the investigational approach already highlighted, as we know, there is no vaccine, no effective vaccine now is available, and post-exposure prophylaxis also not available. No agent is known to be effective in preventing the infection. The other investigation depending upon the individual case. The current treatment option under most of the treatment option are under study trial according to WHO on the basis of evidence, no specific treatment. So the drugs which are being considered for treatment, they are under trial. So I gave one or two drug, although in our hospital have not used this drug like remdesivir and lopinavir. What advise hydroxychloroquine for the healthcare worker for preventing, and that can be given and the azithromycin 500 milligram OD patient have symptoms. All that has to be prescribed by the physician. These all drugs are not, people are not advised to take these drugs from the chemist. They have to have physician prescription for this. So drugs have no, all these drugs have their own complications. So it is very important before starting this has to be after this discussion of physician. So comes to the critical care and management. Oxygen therapy. If the patient or individual, they are like dyspnea, they are not comfortable. So minimal start with oxygen therapy may be started with lower oxygen, and we have so many different devices available for oxygen therapy, and is the most widely used for initial treatment. Specific biochemical, oxygen have specific biochemical actions, distinct range of effective dose, well-defined adverse effect at high doses. So whenever it's required, it starts from lower percentage of oxygen. We have nowadays many delivery devices for oxygen that can be considered for patient. Very important, when somebody is breathing oxygen, there has to be a monitoring at least pulse oximetry. And whenever oxygen has to be documented that the patient has received oxygen for this much duration and this much percentage of oxygen. So many devices. Our target is to 90 to 60% with minimal oxygen. We have the low flow device that has to be decided by the physician according, and sometimes, like, it's controversial, non-invasive ventilation, because non-invasive ventilation is one of the strategy used to other patient. But here the infection for healthcare increase, so this is questionable. One important thing is the patient in initial stage, they self-proning or lying on the, instead of they lie on. So Recently, prone position is encouraged for hospitalized patients. Those are awake, they can themselves lie down in the prone position. There is a distinct advantages, and mechanism is important because all the organs base of the lung, whatever the base, they are collapsed. So by turning prone, the alveoli or base increase and the oxygenation will be better. So self prone position is important for initial the early symptoms also, and in the later stage, even in the patient is on ventilator. And before doing the prone position, for awake they can do themselves, but those patients are critical on ventilator or in intensive care unit. They have we have some we all patient cannot be make prone position. So patient with risk of spinal, like patient have the spine fracture, they cannot be they cannot lie down on the prone. Unstable fractures, recent have gone recent surgery, hemodynamic stability, and they are on life life sustaining cardiac hardwares, recently underwent abdominal surgery, they are in shock, and pregnant patients. So in these patients, the prone position may not be advisable and this may not be helpful. The prone position is have some complication also. For prolonged duration, there is a nerve compression or nerve injury, crush injury, venous stasis, dislodging the, if they are having the equipment or lines, they can dislodge. So, and other catheter and lines, they can dislodge. The prone position can cause a retinal damage, blindness, transient reduction oxygen saturation, they can have the vomiting, and they can develop the cardiac arrhythmias. So these are the, so in those patients are ventilator, it is important to decide whether this patient can be make prone or not. And in, like I said, awake individual, they can themselves prone, but for patient on ventilator, there is a protocol. Everybody has to do the with protocol. At least 6% are required during the proning of the patient on ventilator. So very important, and that whenever prone position is considered, that has to be at least 12 to 16 hours per day should be there. The results are promising, but in intensive care unit is a difficult. Once the patient are not able to maintain with the oxygen by or initial oxygen support, so we have to shift this patient to ICU for mechanical ventilation. So the criteria are well for medical fraternity are always there, that we have to ventilate the patient after, like we put the endotracheal tube through the mouth, so that patient we can ventilate, and patient is sedated, so the patient will not be able to know what is going on. So the criteria are with PEEP and reduce reduce oxygen and maintain the ventilation. So these are the depending different criteria accordingly, that what stage is the patient, those settings are done, and continuous monitoring has the intensivist, and accordingly depending upon the results, they can change the ventilator setting, and once the disease process is evolving or is recovering, then they start reducing the ventilatory support gradually. Once the patient is able to take breaths without much of oxygen, they can be weaned off the ventilator and again monitored for day or two in the ICU, and once they are all right, that can be shifted to the lower facility area. So other supportive area apart to ventilator is we have to monitor continuously what are the respiratory parameters, what are the patient, whether require antibiotic or not, other hemodynamic monitoring like heart rate, blood pressure, and so many monitorings are there. Intensive care unit, other daily, other lab test, coagulation profile, any specific monitoring for that particular patient, and there is a set bundles for care for ventilatory patient. Say for example, like head up position, giving sedation, and daily monitoring for to check the recovery. Then venous thromboprophylaxis, then the gastric ulcer prophylaxis. Say for, and nursing care is very important, and continuous nutritional support. There is a recent advance from the cadaver and the other investigation. These patients are having thrombotic microangiopathy, and that is one. So this is one of the coagulopathies, and that in this increased D-dimer concentration, decrease in platelet, and prolongation of prothrombin time. The post-mortem finding already from the recent study, they have thrombotic deposition in the lungs, mostly in the lungs and other organ also. So for this patient, the subcutaneous low molecular weight heparin or should be given to all the patient. The other recent advances is convalescent plasma therapy. Recently, the ICMR has given the
बेटे मुझे वो प्लग कर और वो उधर पड़ा हुआ है दे दे.
So convalescent plasma therapy. In this, the patient who already had infection and is developed the antibodies. So the plasma, this patient, they suppose this is the infected. This is the infected, and this patient is after recovery. After those patients have recovered from the disease, the plasma has been taken out from those patients, and after processing, that has to be transferred to the new person who has been infected. So that increase in antibody, and the chances of recovery are there, but still has the under trial are going on. Then if the therapy is effective, used for serious patient. Very important is side here, critically ill and at this extreme of ill, more likely to have the psychological problem like anxiety. So it's very important to evaluate the cognitive changes, emotional responses, and provide appropriate emotional support for all. Cognitive behavior therapy, positive psychology examination, and understanding should be given in understandable language and providing continuous support. Relaxation training such as meditation, hypnosis, music therapy, and other to relieve anxiety and depression is very important for this group of patients. Once the patient start recovering, either is fully recovered successfully, can be safely discharged home with particular advice, and the patient, they are for waiting for breathing therapy. They do not require ventilatory support, but they to go home. So that patient can be in high dependency area. Once they are recover further, they can be sent home, and continuous monitoring is still required at home. Instructions should be clear, and for select appropriate breathing relaxation exercise, and the secretion clearing breathing exercise, pulse lip breathing. These are the like meditation also has to be according to their ability, has to be advised. Also is important to take the nutritional diet and they do their routine work and regularly be involved in the self-care and should be monitored for at least 40 days after discharge with the whatever this monitoring and re-examination. They require re-examination 2 to 4 weeks after discharge. If they develop again symptoms, they can be shifted early to the hospital to avoid the serious. So the take-home message is the possibility of COVID-19 in all the patient, those either asymptomatic or those have cough and respiratory tract infection symptoms. As still we have the limitation in the testing and difficulty in making the diagnosis. So this very difficult to diagnose all the patient. Upon suspicion, the infection control measures should be implemented. Social distancing, isolation, and quarantine. Oxygen therapy, initial stage to control the hypoxia, and important is monitoring oxygenation. Our target is 90 to 60% oxygen saturation, and that has to be documented, continuously monitoring. Intensive therapy, if the patient develop to acute respiratory distress syndrome or severe lung infection, they has to be shifted to the intensive care unit, and the care has to be continued in the intensive care unit till they recover. And after that, appropriate discharge instructions and further monitoring is very important. Hello, Saransh.
Thank you, sir. That was it. Yes, sir, I can hear you, sir. Thank you, sir, for this wonderful presentation. I personally know at least two anesthetists in this webinar who have already sent me 2 questions to ask from you at the end of this session. So let's see if we get time, we will share those questions. And
Definitely.
thank you very much again, sir. Taken out the time. It was a very informative clinical perspective as an intensivist and as someone who's managing COVID patients day in and day out. This was excellent. Thank you very much, sir. So now I would like to call upon Dr. Ajay Gupta, sir. He is our final speaker. He is a professor of orthopedics at LNJP Hospital and Maulana Azad Medical College, New Delhi. Although he specializes in orthopedics, he has a keen interest on the immunological aspects of community infections like tuberculosis. His recently published work laid down some path-breaking strategies on COVID-19 and how to maneuver COVID's immunology till a vaccine is formulated. Sir, I leave it on to you for the final take on today's webinar, and after that we will conclude. Ajay Gupta, sir, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you, Indian Association of Age Management in Saransh, for giving me this opportunity. I think that my contents of my talk should be visualized and interpreted in an Indian context perspective. Virus is the same all across the globe. The local immunity, the local environment, and the local health infrastructure. It varies from country to country. So strategy which are used for one country cannot be expected to give the same outcome everywhere else. For example, USA and India, whatever strategy we follow there may not be applicable with equal efficiency in our country. So let's see where we are with COVID-19. All we know is that it's a highly contagious disease. Severity is higher in elderly population with comorbidity being talked. It's like any other common flu, but with a higher mortality of 3.4% edge against 1% mortality of the common flu. We know that there are no vaccines. We know that there is no treatment available except the support, the symptomatic relief. So what do? So we start with case detection, a good diagnosis. We isolate the patient. Whatever contacts that patient has, we quarantine them. To break the chain of transmission, safe distancing and the lockdown, and maintain good hygiene. It's already been talked about. Start with the detection. It's been talked by Dr. Ashok also that there has been a lot, the great proportion of patients have false negative corona test. That would mean that the patient's test is negative, but they're actually positive. So they could be others without knowing it, and the reason could be many. The reason could be specimen collection. That where did you collect it from? You collect it from nose, collect it from the pharynx. What was the skill of the person who collected it? What was the cooperation at the patient's level? Did he allow you to do it properly? And, what was the transportation of that sample? Leave aside metropolitan cities. Sample has to be carried in a specified circumstances, environment, like it should be 2 to 8 degrees centigrade temperature. And then which brand the test has been. There are more than 50 companies who are preparing this test, all FDA approved and all approved in haste because of the unique situation. And what we see is that the minimum amount of RNA, which is required to say that this test is positive, it varies from 100 to 6,250 copies per ml. Which company test you are performing, test could be positive in one company and could be negative in another company. There is so much varies, 100 to 6,250. This was the technical aspect of the test. Then there is a biological aspect. The most people are highly infectious much before they start showing symptoms. That would mean that they have already infected many of their contacts before they could be diagnosed. Then the virus has been isolated even after 37 days of infection. That would mean how long do you keep that patient away? 2 weeks, 3 weeks of isolation?
So sorry to interrupt you, Ajay sir, but your voice is a bit low. Can you increase the volume, sir?
Am I audible now?
Yes, now it's perfect, sir.
Okay, fine. Now look at another aspect of it. We know it. We know the place called Dharavi in Mumbai, where about 7 lakh people live in a small area of 2 square kilometers. One room, you have 10 people, 6 by 10 feet size, but they can't even sit properly. They used to work in shift. So if everybody is together, they can hardly lie down in that small room. So what to talk of isolation and safe distancing? There are patients, they queue up in hundreds for using one single toilet in Dharavi. So if one patient is infected there, and if we say that after 1 month or 6 weeks or 2 months, there are only 50, 100 or few hundred patients infected, I think there is something wrong with the system or with our test. There has to be thousands of patients who have been infected. We may not know them. Either they have not been tested or the test sensitivity has been very poor, or the disease is not that contagious as we think it is. We have all seen various scenes in Sabji Mandis. We have been seeing the migrant laborers. So we have not been actually social distancing, the last proportion of us. Really, the disease is so contagious as it has been to be. The mortality, what we see, we will come to this, but mortality our country has been showing, is the disease really that fatal? So has the virus mutated, or is this the strong immunity among us which is working? so much of having talked about lockdown and about the test, I think that any system with best of intentions and executed most efficiently cannot get results as desired. But there's a silver lining. If nothing else, this lockdown has at least sensitized our population to safe distancing and the precautions we are likely to take and we should take. I think it's like fighting with an enemy whose dimensions one does not know. What is the size? What is the color? What gravity this enemy is? We do not know. So we could be, whatever we are doing, we could be doing it too little or we could be doing it too much for this enemy. But you have no choice but to take available, whatever is available and whatever is known precautions. Every day we get up in the morning, we find a lot of media rhetoric. We see headlines. So many new cases today. Total figure of COVID-19 has crossed this many figure. The India has surpassed China's figure, etc., etc. I think what is more important is the absolute number of COVID deaths per day. Rising of patients, or is the status? That particular month, have they, if you compare them with the similar month, similar date last year or the year before last, been the same? In fact, if I talk of unconfirmed sources, that a death rate of March 19, March 18, and March 20, if we compare, the death rate has improved this year. So what infer? Actually, the number of cases what we display so often in newspapers is a parameter to judge the capacity. India has a 7.3 per thousand per year death rate, which will amount to, if we calculate, nearly 27,000 deaths per day. So number of deaths of maybe 80 or 100 or 120 deaths per day in an entire country of 135 crore population. We shouldn't be really worrying when we have 27,000 deaths per day. It's a very small amount of 100 deaths per day, and out of these 100 deaths of COVID, mind you, there'll be many deaths which would be primarily due to the comorbid conditions of maybe a malignancy, of maybe a gross chest condition, etc., etc. So I request that please don't panic. The things are not that bad as we are reflecting. So what is the likely outcome in coming time? This is the study which was published in 2013 in one of the very important journals, which says that the virulence and transmission for any epidemic is highest at the onset of an epidemic, but it decreases thereafter as the epidemic depletes the pool of susceptible hosts. So this is what is likely to happen, that as time passes on, the virulence of the virus would decrease, and many of us would anyway get infected, and the disease will die from death. Look at here the graph which we are showing the down here. India is at the bottom. Look at the US, and mind you that India is the most populous country. So things are not so bad with us. If you look at this slide, the top slide, the red is a new infection. The blue is a healthy, non-infected person. We have few patients, the infection has just entered. If you talk of 25th of March 2020. The second slide is what we are today or what we will be next week or next to next week, with some yellow and some red, some new infections, and some yellow means they have been infected and they have been immunized. In due course, maybe by 25th of July or nearly early August, most of us would have got infected and we would have got naturally immunized. And that would help that the disease has died its own death. History is, it's not a new infection, it's not something new which has come up. In 1920, there was Spanish flu. We had flu in 1957. virus is something which is there in the universe, which will remain there. Then came the AIDS in 1981. We had H1N1 swine flu in 2009. We had Zika virus in 2015. We had Ebola in 2016, and then we have COVID-19 in today. And we would have COVID-24, we would have COVID-30. There's no guarantee, and there is likely, it is very sure that we will continue to have it because the virus cannot disappear from this universe. Everywhere I go, everybody talks of that when is the vaccination coming? As if this is the only way we can get over with this disease. What I think is the vaccination is a mirage, which leads you nowhere, but it creates only a huge economic opportunity to drug and pharma companies. And I'll substantiate in my few next slides. It's a very important statement I need to make, that nature's every creation has a motive to serve. Be it cheetah, be it machhar, influenza, tuberculosis, typhoid. It is our ignorance only not to recognize these motives. It is very delicately balanced universe where humans should live peacefully and let others also live peacefully. Let's understand what immunity is. Immunity is our defense system not to allow entry of any foreign pathogen or harmful structure inside our body. I'll give a little brief outline. The immunity can be divided into innate immunity. It will help us understand things better. The immunity can be either an innate immunity or a cellular immunity. The innate immunity is it comes immediately. The bacteria will come where? Either it will come when we inhale it or when we eat something. So it's a gut mucosa, or maybe it's a mucosa of a respiratory tract. So it is in the lining of those respiratory tract and the gut that the innate immunity develops. It develops immediately and it's a broad spectrum. As against cellular immunity, which takes time and it's a very specific one. So we can compare it that the innate immunity is like GP, the general practitioner, who treats everything, as against cellular immunity, which is a very highly specialized, either a rheumatologist or a endocrinologist, who say, well, I don't treat common cold, I don't treat ordinary fever. He's a very specialized doctor. When we talk of cellular immunity, is again divided into T1 immunity and T2 immunity. Like we have bad cholesterol, we have good cholesterol. We can say that we have a good immunity, which is T1 immunity, or we have a T2 immunity, which is bad immunity. T1 immunity, which is developed when we get infected, we get confronted with the bacteria or viruses like TB, like typhoid, like influenza. And both these immunities, they cross-regulate each other. Meaning thereby, if we don't get infected to TB, typhoid or influenza, etc., like we have the Western world, they live in a cleaner environment, then what happens is they develop T2 immunity. So the T2 immunity would mean those T2 cells, if they don't find any outside pathogen to fight with, they start fighting with their own cells. They start destroying their own cells and they develop autoimmune diseases. Like you develop rheumatoid arthritis, you develop Crohn's disease, you develop ulcerative colitis, etc. So if you have eradicated these diseases like TB, like Salmonella, you don't get exposed to T1, so you have a lot of these T2 cells, a lot of autoimmune diseases, and that is what is happening in Western countries. So these are a few observations I would like you to share. COVID-19 has affected most of those countries who have robust and free influenza vaccine program, meaning thereby that as the government policy in those countries, everybody who's vulnerable and otherwise also get a free influenza vaccine every year. The prevalence of COVID-19 is seen among those countries where the routine BCG immunization has been discontinued. These are the countries that they have not been exposed to tuberculosis. There's nothing there in that country. And even the BCG vaccination also has been stopped. So basically, they have no T1 immunity in that population. Now, I would another important point is that we published a study in Indian Journal of Tuberculosis in 2016, where non-responder patients of tuberculosis, like patients who have tuberculosis, who have been on anti-tubercular drugs, and they are not MDR, they don't respond to normal anti-tubercular drugs. So what we did was we gave them influenza vaccine, and they responded beautifully. So there is a connection between influenza and TB. Maybe there's a cross immunity. So that gave us an idea that could the reverse also be true? That if you have influenza like we have the COVID-19, could the tuberculosis also help in those patients? Then there is another observation. This was published in Indian Journal of Orthopedics last month and International Journal of Immunology and Immunotherapy. We have talked it already that low T1 immunity due to poor or no exposure to strong T1 antigens like mycobacteria, like Salmonella typhoid, or even bee sting among richer countries is probably the cause for high morbidity and mortality in these countries. That beside BCG, we could use even a Salmonella vaccine to help them as a prophylaxis to COVID-19. This slide would probably like to explain how does it work. It has been reported that a dysregulated and enhanced immune response called cytokine storm, it causes severity of the disease than the virus itself in these patients of COVID-19. Now, as Dr. Ashok was talking, that the bacteria, particularly the COVID-19, has M spikes here spreading out from there, which has a particular configuration, a particular shape. It enters our respiratory mucosa, and mucosa cell where we have the innate immunity, the capacity to have innate immunity. And this mucosa also has various receptors. Like he was talking, we have ACE2 receptors, we have TLR5 receptors, TLR4 receptors. And this is like lock and key mechanism that if the particular shape of that M spike of that receptor on the bacteria or the virus fits into that particular receptor on the mucosa cell, it will allow its entry. And that is the basis that if a virus which is prevalent in human cannot infect monkey, cannot infect a bird, and similarly a monkey virus cannot come and infect us because a particular receptor on the virus has to find a similar receptor on our mucosa inside our body. What has been described is, now these are the patients, probably if we talk of Western countries, this particular slide is important for Western population. They have no T1 immunity because they have never been exposed to tuberculosis or Salmonella. They have no innate immunity because they have been living in a very clean environment. And even things like influenza, they have been given only the vaccine. So their mucosa has not been exposed with many irritants and many pathogens, so they have no innate immunity either. So whenever the virus comes, it enters their mucosa, and since there is no innate immunity, it creates havoc. It overworks, it creates so much of chemical substances, the chemokines, etc., that it causes cytokine storm and leads to so much of mortality and morbidity on those patients. Now what we do is, if those patients, we have TLR5 also, these are the receptors, which is a relatively broad spectrum receptor. If we give them stimulus to this mucosal cell and try to create innate immunity, something what we have is a flagellin. Flagellin is probably like a tail with many bacteria, a lot of gram-negative bacteria, be it Salmonella or be it Pseudomonas, which is a good antigenic substance and which gets attached to TLR5. So if we can use flagellin in these patients, which could be used as a vaccine. In fact, the flagyellin has been used as an adjuvant to many influenza vaccines also. So if you give flagyellin, it gets attached to TLR5, it gives them good innate immunity. So when the coronavirus comes, it doesn't find an environment which is absolutely blank. There is enough innate immunity in those patients, and they do better. So with this concept, probably the Salmonella vaccine would be relatively useful in those patients who have not been exposed, who don't have much innate immunity, who do not have much T1 immunity because they have never been infected with tuberculosis or Salmonella, etc.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. Just one announcement. As we're running a bit short on time, you can send your questions and queries on the chat and on the email that I've mentioned in the chat box. So we'll be scrapping the question and answer session. So carry on, sir.
Thank you. Just those two more slides. I know it's not moving. Yeah. What I feel is the influenza vaccine has been the biggest obstacle in our fight against COVID-19. Why? The influenza vaccine deprives patients of an opportunity to develop innate natural immunity. And influenza vaccine is, we have talked it over already, Dr. Ashok talked, that influenza virus is a uniquely characterized by frequent mutations due to its inherent quality of this virus that it changes. That's why these patients have to be given injections with a different strain. So by the time we develop a vaccine, a few months, 6 months, 7 months, the virus anyway would have got mutated and been a different strain. And the last point is that how do we develop vaccine? What we do is that if we have a human virus, we try to cultivate it in a monkey or maybe in a bird, grow it so that it changes, it mutates, and then we bring it back to human being and it works as a vaccine. So we have been experimenting it, and this is exactly what has happened is when during this experimentation, a bat virus got mixed with a human virus and has given rise to this COVID-19. So these experiments of playing with nature has only evolved such dreadful strains as COVID-19. So what should we do to boost the waning immunity, which is in the relatively elderly population? So we stimulate local innate immunity by using irritants. This is all we have in our hands, which could be adrak, which could be haldi, long, mirch, lychee, etc. They create innate immunity because they irritate the local mucosa there, either in the gut or in the respiratory tract. We could be doing havan. It's a very, could sound very absurd, but yes, it may have some logic. Like you do dhubatti, shankhnad, when you blow that, it creates a kind of a closed compartment with high pressure. Could have some logic behind it. Not in a pandemic time, but a community exposure. When we go to mandir, we go to masjid, we go to churches, we are breathing the same air. Everybody in that complex, my air is in contact with another person. We are breathing same air. So we are trying to share each other's immunity, not to be probably practiced today in this pandemic time, but otherwise. This is one advantage which we get. And then the vaccines like BCG or Salmonella. Other options we have is we keep fit, we have a disciplined life, a disciplined, frequent, not very frequent, disciplined eating, a disciplined physical activity, and plenty of sunlight. Take all medicines regularly, frequent gargles, steam, hot beverages, no chilled water, no air conditioners, or if at all we use air conditioners, the temperature should be 24 to 30 degrees. So the virus, it probably replicates only in cool and the dry air. Humidity maintain between 70, dry air is not for us, and be supplemented. Avoid any unnecessary trip outside and maintain communication so that you don't develop any mental conditions. I think these are the precautions one could take with elderly people. Thank you. How late have I been?
Thank you, sir. You haven't been late. You've been right on time. Don't worry about it, sir.
Any questions?
So, now, as we conclude, just a second, sir. Again, thank you very much, Ajay sir. That was quite an interesting analogy where you compared our community structure, the vaccination, how it has been helping, and tuberculosis, which has been a very endemic disease in this country, and we have been dealing with it for so long. Also, on one note, I also believe that with all of these hygienic measures that suddenly India as a country has been following, I'm pretty sure a lot of diseases will also come down subsequently. Well, it may take some time, but hopefully it will, because inherently we haven't been a very hygienic society. So with these hygiene standards being enforced on us by the government, by doctors, by the civil society, I hope it really takes us a long way. Thank you very much again, sir. We do have time for questions, and some questions have been emailed to me. So I will take those questions up one by one. The first question. The first question, sir, is for you, Ajay sir. It's been directed at you. As the lockdown ends and more people begin to more and more people begin working, what do you think should be the precautions to take when I come back home from work and I live with my parents? So, what is your take on that, sir? Ajay sir.
Whatever you are continuing, you must continue. There's nothing else you can do. The life has to continue. You can't continue with this for lifelong. But you must realize that the enemy is not that bad. With time, it will come down on its virulence. And maybe you're already infected. Maybe I'm already infected just because I have not been tested. And the disease somehow, luckily, is not so virulent. And the quantum of disease, the quantum of mortality, morbidity is not so bad. So that's a silver line. Whatever you are doing, you should continue that only, and pray to God that everything settles all right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Our next question is directed towards Dr. Anand. Sir, are you there?
Audible?
Sir? Yes, sir. Audible, sir. Sir, the question directed is: are empirical antibiotics recommended for all symptomatic and asymptomatic patients, both of COVID-19? Empirical antibiotics.
Is a very good question. So what is antibiotic is not going to cover the viral infection. If you are if patient is depend upon the symptomatology. Patient doesn't coughing is not the need. Coughing doesn't require antibiotic. In later stage, if these patient deteriorated and they are not able to bring out their normal secretion, routine, and they are on intubated, they are on ventilator, get infected. Then only they will require empiric antibiotic. Otherwise, no. We have so many patients, and no patient has been given any antibiotic till they are reaching that stage of intensive care unit. So doesn't require.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Sir, next question for Dr. Ratan, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can.
Sir, this is a question coming from somebody who's managing a hospital in Gurgaon. I don't know which hospital this is, but they're saying that recently we are planning to acquire UV sterilizers. Although I haven't read enough papers to prove that UV sterilizers can sterilize the OPD areas, but would you recommend UV sterilizers for this disease?
UV rays, especially the C range, it has good antiviral as well as antibacterial activity, but it has no protective, no penetration power. And then it is our eyes and skin are susceptible to it. That would mean that you can use UV light to sterilize the air and the surfaces when nobody is around. And you should shut off the UV lights and these when anybody enters inside. I think it was maybe in Bangalore that somebody used an discarded fridge and installed UV lights in that, and then they would keep all their wallets and keys, etc., and things for half an hour, and that will be sterilized, so that your phones, your wallet, your keys, and other things, even paper, could be kept inside. So UV light can play a role if used wisely.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. So we move on to the next question, sir. Again for you, Ratan sir. So this says that since you have been a part of the World Health Organization and it is doing the major quantity of work in COVID globally, sorry, so this question has been framed wrongly. I really apologize. I think I'll ask them to repeat this question. Sorry, sir, I'll come back to you. I've just asked them to repeat the question. I'll come back to you, sir. I'll come back to you. Sir, we're moving on to back to Dr. Anand, sir.
Yeah.
So this question is for you. Do non-steroidal anti-inflammatories worsen COVID-19? If I have a fever because of COVID and except paracetamol, if it's not coming down, can I take Brufen and can I take other NSAIDs? Or will they be detrimental?
See, if this recently it has been found that the coagulation can be deranged. So paracetamol is the drug of choice for fever. You spare all NSAID because all NSAID have the other problem also, like they can create, they can do this peptic ulceration. So the paracetamol is sufficient to control the fever and pain or myalgia. It is not recommended in initial stage.
Yes, sir, it's not recommended. Rightly said, sir. Sir, moving back to Dr. Ashok Ratan, sir.
Yes.
Sir, you spoke about household masks that can be worn if there is no availability for N95 or surgical masks for us. But are there any rules for household masks? When should we wash them? How often can we use them? And when can we wash them? How often can we use them?
See, whenever we are out in the open, in public place, we should wear mask, whichever type of mask we want to use. And normally, it will be a good idea to wash them in the evening and then so that it dries up the next morning and you can wear them again. We use N95 mask in the lab because we are working in area where we know infection is possible, viruses in the samples, and it's very uncomfortable wearing N95 mask. We can wear only for some time. It has to be close fitting and it's very difficult to breathe. So I would not recommend that people go out and buy N95 mask and wear when it's not required.
Okay, sir.
Mask is useful for yourself and for the society. So whenever you are in public, besides social distancing, do wear the mask.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir. We're moving on to our last question, or maybe the second last question. This is directed at all the panelists, actually. Uh, there was a recent study, there was a recent opinion article in BMJ, British Medical Journal, where it was noted that the coronavirus, even after people have become asymptomatic, their symptoms, even after they've become negative, their symptoms of malaise, fatigue last for 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, and even a month or 2 months at a stretch. So, in the Indian context, are we seeing a milder strain in the treated patients? Because we are getting stats from the media and from the government about recovered patients and death of patients and testing patients and how many are positive. But in the long-term follow-up, how are these patients faring? Because apparently in Italy, people were asked to stop their work, but after starting working, they were so tired and so fatigued that they had to take sick leave again, even being COVID negative. So I'll start with Ashok sir, and then this is for all of the panelists. So one by one, we'll take up this question.
I can take it up in the way you feel like.
Yes, sir. Suresh sir,
Yeah.
please.
Okay. You see, as far as this so-called generalized weakness or maybe some sort of inability to cope up the office work or maybe at home, there are a number of reasons for that. To begin with, I'll say, as far as the COVID-19 is concerned, this does affect central nervous system as well as peripheral nervous system. I didn't go in detail personally because that is not our topic to be addressed. But as far as the weakness is concerned, this has been documented. This does affect the muscles. This does affect the nerves also. So there is a neuropathy also, there is a myopathy. But for this, there may be some sort of electrolyte imbalance. Quoted or quoted, I don't know whether the kidney is at fault or some other areas which can result into myalgia or myopathic situation. Yet another very common, I'll say psychosomatic disorder, which has been highlighted to LMH. See, psychosomatic disorder, you see, the lockdown, the type of social pressure, economical pressure, and depending upon somebody's mindset, personality, there is going to be reactive depression. No, there can be, rather than reactive depression, there can be, as far as this particular lockdown or the environment can trigger or precipitate somebody's endogenous depression also, or maybe some agitated depression. I've seen many patients coming to me now. So all these things can result into some sort of not interested in the things, then some sort of weakness, no interest, letharginess. So this is, I think, all these things may be possible in such like situation. We can undertake, should not undertake, because right now we cannot have a clear roadmap that we have to go for the EMG, NCV, or maybe different electrolyte imbalance, electrolyte evaluation, or some sort of psychometric analysis. But for these can be the factors which can be responsible for these things.
All right, sir. Thank you, sir. The next question is coming from a dentist. The question is, I have stopped my practice because of COVID-19. Since dentistry involves a lot of aerosol generation and I have a lot of old patients who need not urgent but semi-urgent dental care, shall I test all of these patients before taking them up for procedures once I resume my practice, or how should I go about it? Suresh sir?
Yeah, okay. See, to me, in the way all the speaker has given a nice, lucid presentation, there can be all sort of immunity which can be seen, but we can reduce it. There can be humoral immunity, there can be late cellular immunity, there can be silent herd immunity, or at the community silent immunity, there can be various sort of triggered immunity. And as far as the aerosol is concerned, first of all, we have to find it whether they are having some sort of viral content or not. And should we or not go for some sort of positivity? Whether this positivity is going to be positive for how long, I really don't know, because this is possibly, to me, it's a nebular area, a delicate area, an unquestioned area. The other speakers can highlight it. For how much time the IgG, IgM is going to be positive in a given patient? We don't know, first of all, what type of patient. Because a walk-in sort of patient in the old age, we don't know, suppose if this is hale and hearty, not having any sort of comorbidities, and is having reasonably well preserved oral hygiene, and I think that sort of patient will be least infective. And even if we are going to check some sort of these tests on IgM, IgG, possibly IgG, so for how much time this is going to be positive? Because this will be my question, indirect question to Dr. Ratan. We do not know the natural course of the disease. This is a new challenge which you are facing with. The immunity or the positivity may come down. This just depends upon the PCR, means evaluation of that of the antibodies only.
Dr. Ratan sir, would you like to add something?
Yes, sir. This is, of course, concerning the surgeons, not only the dentists, but also the surgeons, and especially the gynecologists who cannot postpone the delivery that they have to do. And at this moment, I must confess that the information is still emerging, so that what I suggest may not be right. But giving that fact, what has been suggested is that maybe PCR and antibody should be tested one day before any elective surgery. If the antibodies are present and PCR is negative, please go ahead and do the surgery. If both are negative, please go to the surgery. And PCR is positive, then postpone the surgery if it is elective. If you have to do the surgery, then you know that both the anesthetist and the surgeon are at increased risk of getting the infection. But as I said, that the information is emerging, and whether we should be spending that much money or not is something that will have to be weighed in, and whether everybody needs to be done or some risk factors can be involved. That at the moment, no firm guidelines are there, but this is what is emerging.
Sir, I move on to Dr. Ajay Gupta, sir, with the same question, sir, because you are managing orthopedics in one of a really good hospital in Delhi, Maulana Azad Medical College. So, how are you dealing with? Are you testing everyone for surgery, or how is it affecting your life as an orthopedic surgeon? And how do you?
I would think that knowing the status of the patient in terms of his infection to corona is very important. Not that it is putting the surgeon and anesthetist to the risk. It's a risk to the patient also that he's getting operated when he's actively infected. See, the virus has already caused insult to his immunological system. And when we operate, it's a second insult to him. Because when we operate, we are giving him an injury, and that injury will also probably stimulate an immunological response. So that will be a second injury, and the patient may not be in a fit condition to tolerate it. So this is in patient's interest. Unless it's a very life-saving surgery, the patient should be, probably the surgery should be withheld till such time he's out of it. And out of it, there are various parameters that, like his lymphocyte counts, like his WBCs, they should be brought back. His ESR, etc., should be brought back, and then only he should be operated. And I would like to probably take another question which somebody had raised, that they have a myalgia after the infection.
Yes, sir.
This was probably very commonly seen after chikungunya, etc. also.
Yes, sir. Yes, it continues for 6 months or something. Go on, sir. Go on.
So the patient is with a systemic effect. The patient has been exposed to virus, which has probably stimulated all his immunological system, all his blood cells. So he's likely to have that after effect for some time, and he can be treated only symptomatically. He has got nothing to worry about.
Okay. Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I would like to add what Dr. Gupta is telling.
Yes, sir. Please do. Please.
Beyond doubt, in chikungunya, neuropathy has been established.
Mm-hmm.
about 70 to 80% of the people having chikungunya has been found clinically or electrophysiologically having neuropathy and myopathy. So that's what I'm telling you. Because we cannot go, because slowly and slowly, even now we are talking of stroke. The prevalence of stroke as far as COVID-19 is concerned, we are talking of encephalopathy. We are talking of some sort of dementia being triggered by this as far as COVID-19 is concerned. I'm talking of neurology now. So in chikungunya also, even the arthropathies and other things, joint pain used to be real severe as far as the chikungunya is concerned, or even the backaches. So this has also been partly because of the neuropathy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Moving on, we just have two more questions to go. I think these are short questions. The first question is, which mask is better, the N99 or the N95?
It depends. Mask depends upon what is the purpose. It depends upon what is it that you want to prevent and who's going to use it. So if you are doing well, then a respirator is required. And N95 and N99 is only the efficiency of removing the particles that are required. For general public, ordinary mask will also do. And for surgeons, most of the time, triple layer will also do. But if you're going near the patient and you're going to manipulate anything in the mouth, then N95 is what you should be doing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Moving on to the last question. This question again. This is coming from a doctor, so I will have to take this question. I have psoriasis, although it's controlled. Do you think I am more at risk, because this is also an immunological disorder, for contacting coronavirus, psoriasis? Is there any? I don't think there's any proven link, but anyone would like to comment on this? The panelists.
Should I?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please go ahead. It's open for the house.
Yeah, as far as the psoriasis is concerned, it's basically the cellular immunity which is affected. And this is again a systemic disease. There is even vasculopathy also, which is seen as far as psoriasis is concerned. Even there can be problem as far as the lungs are concerned. So it depends upon whether this is the local psoriasis, whether the generalized psoriasis, what is the quantum of disease a person is having. But for sure, this is linked with the immunology. And this COVID-19 is also, and as far as the old age is concerned, again, we have talked so much because these sort of viruses, because sometimes I wonder, as far as about the practice in India is concerned, in case we are going to talk about the family history of a given disease, we really do not go into detail of it as far as the family tree is concerned. Something is there which is going to change the genetic philosophy or genetic code of a given person, and ultimately the amino acids or maybe the immunity of the thing. That's why Dr. Gupta, in the way he nicely told that there is going to be immunological aberrations. There may be autoimmune diseases which can be triggered by this. So there may be direct or indirect effect, but per se, there is no highlight which has been made dermatology vis-a-vis Corona-19. But I will say that there can be in future something can highlight as far as such type of situation is concerned.
Yes, that's true. It's more about. I don't think it's about psoriasis. I mean, there is not. If there is, hasn't been so much time that has passed that we can conclude that any specific disease aggravates coronavirus or anything. Nor there has been any research. So it'll be very hard to say something which is. But then again, whether there is a disease or not, it is we are going through a pandemic, and it is our duty to protect ourselves, even if we don't have any other disease whatsoever.
Saransh, I would think, Saransh, 1 minute. I would think that if this doctor is suffering from psoriatic arthritis, he can be considered a relatively immunologically compromised person, so he's more at risk. So he should take more precautions.
Yeah, has to take more precautions, definitely, because it is an immunological process. Agreed, sir. Okay, sir. I will thank you all, sir. Suresh sir, will you can you I will hand over the final stages of this meeting to you so that you can thank all the panelists for their time, for their efforts, for their presentations, and all the participants. Suresh sir, to you, sir.
To me, Saransh?
Yes, sir. To you, sir. A parting note, sir.
Okay. First of all, I'm grateful and I'm very happy to learn more and to take many things carry home from the speakers. It was a very lucid and informative deliberation by Dr. Ratan, Dr. Anand, and Dr. Gupta. It's really many things to be carried home from what they have taught. In addition to that, before I say a word of thank to you, thank to them, I will say that prevention is always better than cure. What can prevent the disease? It is not the corona, but the other things also. I'll say lifestyle. Lifestyle change is one of the important things. And another important thing, I must highlight the metabolic syndrome. The metabolic syndrome and lifestyle disease, I'll say three words: no hurry, no worry, and no curry. A nice sleep. We must avoid sleep apnea syndrome because these are the things which is going to jeopardize our immunity, our defense mechanics, our aging process. These are the important things which needs to be taken care of. And in Corona-19 particularly, oral hygiene and lung hygiene. We have to give lot of care to these things. And after this, I say many thanks to you, Saransh. You conducted all these things. To Professor VP Bansal, who is the chairman and the person who conceptualized everything. And to all the speakers, a hearty thanks. And to all the persons who came forward to listen our view on this related mainly to the aged population. I wish all the person in the age, they should have a graceful aging process, keeping their movement vigilantly and purposefully. Thank you very much. Thanks all.
Thank
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.